My name is Jolene Carter, 32, an architect who's been paying her parents' mortgage for the past 3 years. They were hosting their 30th wedding anniversary dinner at an elegant restaurant downtown. I wasn't on the guest list. Mom had explained earlier that seating was limited, and they wanted to keep the celebrations small and intimate. I told myself it didn't matter anyway, because work had been overwhelming lately. At least that's what I tried to believe. But that evening, when I opened social media, the excuse shattered instantly. Ava, my sister, had uploaded a picture. Everyone was gathered around a long table, glowing beneath warm golden lights, champagne glasses lifted mid-toast, smiling faces leaning toward each other. The caption read, "Family only. We finally have everyone together." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening as the words seemed to burn straight through me. After a moment, my fingers moved almost automatically. I typed a comment beneath the photo. "Congrats. Mortgage and taxes are all yours now." Before I had time to second-guess myself, I pressed send. 5 minutes later, the post vanished completely. 10 minutes after that, my phone started lighting up nonstop. 30 missed calls appeared one after another. I didn't answer any of them. I simply sat there in my small apartment in Albany, the pale light of my phone casting shadows across the dark room. In that quiet moment, a realization settled in. Maybe I hadn't just been left out of the dinner. Maybe I had been quietly removed from their lives a long time ago. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to leave me out. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, stay with me, because what followed made me question everything I once believed about loyalty and love. And when you finish hearing this story, ask yourself honestly what you would have done if you were standing where I was. Truthfully, things had always followed this same pattern. Ava was the sun at the center of everything, and I was the shadow quietly trailing behind her. When we were kids, she would scribble messy stick figure drawings for Mother's Day, and Mom would proudly frame them like priceless art. One year, I brought home a blue ribbon from a statewide science fair, something I had worked months for. The ribbon ended up folded and tucked away in a drawer before dinner even started. Mom said she didn't want me to become arrogant by showing it off. Even back then, I started to understand the rules of our household. Ava's smallest attempt was celebrated like a triumph, while my biggest accomplishments were treated like expectations I had merely fulfilled. As we got older, the imbalance only grew stronger. When the family car broke down, it was me who wired money from the first salary I earned after college. When Dad's hospital bills began stacking up faster than they could pay them, I quietly sent another check. I tried not to think about the silence that followed instead of gratitude. Every time something went wrong, my phone would ring. Not for conversation or connection, but for help, for money, for solutions. I convinced myself I was doing it because it was the responsible thing to do. But deep inside, there was another reason. I kept hoping that one day they would finally see me the way I wanted to be seen. That maybe they would realize my value. That moment never arrived. Meanwhile, Ava's life seemed to collapse before mine had even truly begun. She married young, divorced just as quickly, and returned home carrying boxes of clothes and a wounded pride she tried to hide. Mom welcomed her back as if she had returned from some heroic battle. I still remember hearing her tell a neighbor, "Ava is doing her best, poor thing." The sympathy in her voice was endless. When I visited that weekend, I offered to take Ava out to dinner, hoping to lift her mood a little. She declined, saying she was exhausted. Later that night, as I walked past the kitchen, I overheard Mom speaking quietly to Dad. She said I didn't understand what real hardship looked like. I almost laughed when I heard that. Apparently, wiring money for their bills didn't count as struggle. Living in Albany gave me physical distance from them, but it also turned into evidence of my supposed indifference. Whenever I missed a family dinner because of late meetings or work deadlines, Mom would sigh dramatically and tell relatives, "Jolene is just too busy for family these days." I worked relentlessly, climbing step by step through my career, earning every promotion through long nights and relentless pressure. But none of it mattered to them. In their eyes, I was simply the daughter who had drifted away. The truth was more complicated. Being close to them hurt. The nearer I stood, the more invisible I felt. Dad, Robert, rarely involved himself in any of it. He was a quiet man who avoided conflict whenever possible. Whenever Mom criticized me or dismissed something I had done, he would shrug gently and say, "You know how your mother is," as if those few words explained everything. Once, after an especially tense dinner years ago, I asked him directly why he never defended me. He stared down at his plate for a long moment before replying softly, "Keeping the peace is easier than proving you're right." That was when I understood something important. His silence wasn't neutral. It was loyalty to her, not to me. Years passed like that, measured by phone calls that always followed the same pattern. They would begin with casual questions about work or the weather, a few minutes of polite conversation, and then slowly transition into requests. The roof needed repairs. Ava needed a little financial help again. Something else had broken. I kept saying yes, not because generosity came naturally to me, but because refusing felt like betrayal. The guilt of saying no weighed heavier than the money itself. Only recently did I begin to notice the pattern clearly. They only reached out when something needed fixing. When life was smooth, I faded completely from their world. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment was quiet, I would scroll through old family photos stored on my phone. In nearly every picture, Ava's arm was looped around Mom, both of them smiling brightly, while Dad stood close beside them. And somewhere at the edge of the frame was me, slightly off to the side, smiling politely but often half cut out of the picture. At first, I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down I knew those images reflected something real. It wasn't done with cruelty or deliberate intention. It was simply habit. I had become the background figure in our family story, the dependable one, the invisible one. People always say family love is unconditional. In my experience, it came with quiet terms attached, invisible agreements and emotional interest rates. I had become the safety net beneath their lives, stretched thin but always expected to hold. For years, I told myself that love meant sacrifice, that giving more than you received was simply part of being loyal. Only recently had I begun to question what I called love had really just been convenience for them all along. A week before the anniversary dinner, Mom called me. Her voice carried that careful sweetness she used whenever she was about to say something unpleasant. She asked how work was going, mentioned that I must be very busy lately, and then explained that she and Dad were finalizing the seating arrangements for their anniversary celebration. I could hear the hesitation forming before she even reached the point. The restaurant had limited seating, she said, and cousins and old friends had confirmed their attendance at the last minute. Things had become complicated. She hoped I would understand that it wasn't personal. She reminded me that she loved me very much. I sat at my desk while she spoke, the hum of my computer filling the background. At first, her words didn't sting. They just lingered in the air, heavy and slow, waiting for the meaning to settle in. Eventually, I told her it was fine and that she should enjoy the celebration. I even wished them a wonderful evening. She sounded relieved immediately, almost tearful as she ended the call. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from Ava. "Don't take it personally," she wrote, adding a smiling emoji at the end. I looked at the message for longer than I should have. Ava had always possessed a strange talent for disguising superiority as sympathy. Her text wasn't meant to comfort me. It was confirmation. She knew I had been excluded, and she wanted me to know that she knew. I started typing a response 3 different times, deleting each attempt before sending it. In the end, I left the message unanswered. Later that evening at the office, my coworker Na noticed something was wrong. She wasn't the kind of person who asked unnecessary questions, but she always seemed to sense when something was bothering someone. We had worked in neighboring cubicles for nearly 2 years, long enough for her to recognize when I grew unusually quiet. She suggested we grab coffee before heading home. I agreed, mostly because I didn't want to sit alone with my thoughts. At the small cafe near the corner, she waited patiently until I began speaking. Eventually, I told her about Mom's phone call, about the limited seating excuse, about Ava's message. Na stirred her drink slowly while listening, her expression thoughtful but calm. After a moment, she said quietly, "They only love the version of you that pays their bills." The sentence fell between us like a pin dropping in a silent room. I almost laughed, partly because the statement sounded cruel, and partly because it was painfully accurate. Na wasn't trying to be harsh. She simply saw the situation more clearly than I allowed myself to. I explained how I had always been the one sending money whenever something went wrong, how their calls rarely happened unless there was a problem to solve. She nodded as though she had suspected that all along. Then she said something simple that lingered in my mind long after we left. "Maybe you should stop fixing everything." I wanted to tell her it wasn't that easy. Families don't break apart neatly like contracts, but the truth was I didn't know how to stop. When we stepped outside the cafe, the night air felt colder than expected. City lights reflected across wet pavement, shimmering beneath passing cars. For a moment I imagined Mom and Ava somewhere warm, laughing while deciding where everyone would sit during the anniversary dinner. I wondered if there had ever been a moment when my presence had truly felt necessary rather than inconvenient. That night, after returning home, I went online and ordered them a gift anyway. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a small silver photo frame engraved with the words, 30 years of love. I thought maybe it could bridge the distance, even if only slightly. I wrapped it carefully once it arrived, wrote a short card that simply said, "Congratulations, wishing you both many more happy years," and mailed it to their house the next morning before heading to work. 3 days later, a package appeared outside my apartment door. The return label was written in Mom's handwriting. Inside the box sat the exact same photo frame, still wrapped exactly the way I had sent it. A small note rested on top. It read, "We already have too much." I stood there in the hallway, holding the box, unsure whether I felt more angry or embarrassed. The message sounded polite on the surface, but the meaning beneath it was unmistakable. My gesture hadn't been needed, just like my presence at their celebration. That evening, Ava called. Her voice carried that overly cheerful tone she used whenever pretending concern. She told me Mom hadn't meant to hurt my feelings, that it had probably just been a misunderstanding, and that I shouldn't take things so personally. I said I wasn't upset, though my throat felt tight as I spoke. Before ending the call, she added, "You know how Mom gets when she's planning something big." Yes, I knew exactly how Mom got. What hurt more was knowing that Ava always defended her, even when she understood perfectly well that something was wrong. After hanging up, I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes drift slowly through the quiet streets. The city seemed unusually still, and my reflection in the glass looked more exhausted than I realized I felt. I thought again about what Na had said earlier. Maybe they only loved the version of me that provided help, the version that stayed silent and never asked for a seat at the table. For the first time in my life, I wondered if love built entirely on obligation could truly be called love at all. I didn't cry. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that appears when expectations finally disappear. I unplugged my phone, placed it on the table, and went to bed earlier than usual. There was nothing left to say anyway. The following week would arrive, the anniversary dinner would take place, and I would not be there. What surprised me most was realizing that the thought didn't hurt nearly as much as it once would have. Saturday night, my feed froze on a single post. I had just finished cleaning my apartment, trying to distract myself from the thought of the anniversary dinner happening across town. I wasn't expecting anything yet. The moment I opened the app, there it was, Ava's update sitting at the top of my screen as if waiting for me. The picture loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, before it revealed everyone standing together in front of the restaurant. They were dressed in coordinated white outfits, smiling as if the night were a perfect portrait of love and harmony. At the center stood Mom and Dad, their hands intertwined, surrounded by relatives, friends, and even neighbors I barely recognized. The caption read, "Family only. We finally have everyone together." My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she had posted it without realizing how cruel it looked. But then I saw the comments below. Mom's name appeared first. Couldn't be prouder. Her words sat there like a stamp of approval on my exclusion. Dozens of heart emojis followed. From family friends, messages praising how beautiful everyone looked, how strong and close the Carters were. Each comment was another quiet cut. I read the caption again and again, as if repetition would change the meaning. It didn't. The more I stared, the colder I felt. The white clothes, the glowing smiles, the polished setting, they weren't just for celebration. They were for performance. My family didn't want honesty. They wanted image. They wanted to look united, even if unity meant pretending I didn't exist. My eyes blurred slightly, but I refused to cry. Instead, I scrolled back up, pressed the comment box, and typed what came naturally. "Congrats. Mortgage and taxes are all yours now." It wasn't loud. It wasn't vulgar. But it was true. For 3 years, I had been the one making sure that house existed. Every check, every transfer, every quiet sacrifice came from me. That photo wouldn't even be possible without those payments. I hit post and watched the words settle beneath Ava's perfect caption. Then I locked my phone and set it aside. 15 minutes passed before I picked it up again. The post was gone. My notification bar blinked nonstop with messages and missed calls. The numbers climbed fast. 10, 20, 30. Mom's name appeared the most. I didn't answer. I just sat there, staring at the phone, vibrating on the table, feeling the weight of every buzz. When it finally stopped, a message came through. "How could you embarrass us like that? You're being selfish." I put the phone face down and leaned back, letting the silence settle. The word selfish repeated in my head until it almost became meaningless. I had been called many things in my life. Cold, distant, too focused, but selfish was a new invention. My chest tightened, not from guilt, but from disbelief. After everything I had done, after every bill I had covered, every late payment I'd fixed, they still managed to paint me as the villain. I stood by the window, looking out at the street below. The snow had started again, quiet and persistent. Somewhere across town, they were still probably laughing, maybe already home from the dinner, full and satisfied. I imagined Mom recounting the moment I commented, Ava defending her post, Dad saying nothing at all. That last part, at least, I could be sure of. I made tea, just to have something to do with my hands. The kettle hissed, filling the small apartment with steam. I thought about the past 3 years, about every time I logged into my bank account to transfer the mortgage payment, telling myself it was temporary, that one day things would be different. I never questioned why I was doing it. Family needed help, and that was what good daughters did. I didn't even put my name on the deed. I told myself I didn't need credit. Standing there, it hit me all at once. I wasn't just excluded from their table, I had been excluded from their gratitude long ago. They didn't see me as a person anymore, just a resource. And that post, that perfect photo, was proof. They could erase me from their picture, but not from the bills that kept their lives stable. The phone rang again. I let it ring. I knew if I picked up, Mom would speak first, her tone dripping with disappointment instead of remorse. She would tell me that families shouldn't air dirty laundry online, that appearances mattered more than feelings, and she would never realize the irony that I had been keeping their appearances intact for years. Eventually, the call stopped. The apartment grew quiet again, except for the low hum of the heater. I sat on the couch, tea cooling in my hand, and thought of Naya's voice in the cafe. They only love the version of you that pays the bills. It wasn't just a clever observation, it was prophecy. I took one last look at my phone before turning it off completely. The light faded from the screen, and for the first time that night, the quiet felt peaceful. Somewhere deep inside, under the hurt, something shifted. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was awakening. I didn't know yet. All I knew was that I was done being the invisible sponsor of their perfect image. 2 weeks passed, and silence got expensive. I had stopped sending the mortgage payments the same day I decided to stop explaining myself. For 3 years, my account had released the same amount every month, like clockwork, with thanks or acknowledgement. The moment I cut that flow, the quiet that followed was heavier than I imagined. The first week was still. The second began to hum with consequence. On Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a message from Mom. The bank keeps calling. They said something about missed payments. Is everything all right? It was written with feigned confusion, the kind that hides accusation beneath politeness. I read it twice and didn't answer. A few hours later, she sent another. We didn't want to bother you, but they say it's urgent. The word urgent was her favorite way to manipulate guilt. I could almost hear her sigh between the lines, the practiced tone of a mother who believed love meant control. By Friday, Ava joined in. Her post appeared on social media, public for everyone to see. Some people forget who raised them. It read, paired with a photo of her holding Mom's hand. The comments were predictable. Sympathy, validation, concern. Stay strong, someone wrote. Family can hurt the most, another said. Ava replied to each one with heart emojis and crying faces, playing the role she had perfected. Devoted daughter, loyal sister, victim of someone else's coldness. I scrolled through the thread once, closed the app, and let my phone fall onto the couch. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a response, but ignoring them didn't stop reality from catching up. 3 days later, an envelope from the bank arrived in my mailbox. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't lived in that house for years, and all financial ties were supposed to be clean, except the payments I chose to send. The envelope felt heavy, its paper thick, official. I tore it open and scanned the first page. My name was printed in bold letters across the top. Jolene Carter, borrower and guarantor. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The letter wasn't about late payments. It was about a new refinance. The numbers were unfamiliar, larger, riskier. The house had been refinanced under my name 2 months earlier. I reread the page, searching for an error, a misprint, anything. But every signature line, every identifier was mine. The next morning, I called the bank. After being transferred through 3 departments, a calm voice introduced himself as Ethan Davis, the account manager. Miss Carter, he said, I see your inquiry regarding the refinance. How can I assist? I asked him to verify the details. He hesitated, then said, the refinance was processed in July. The primary borrowers listed are Robert and Evelyn Carter, with your signature authorizing the guarantee. My pulse quickened. I never signed anything, I said. Can you send me the documents? There was a pause before he answered. We have electronic copies on file. The signature matches prior authorizations. It appears consistent. The word consistent struck like a blade. Someone had used my digital signature, my saved authorization data from prior transactions. I pressed further, asking for timestamps, IP addresses, confirmation of the signing method. Ethan grew cautious. Legally, I can provide that through a formal request, but if you're suggesting fraud, we can initiate an internal review. The room seemed smaller as he spoke. The air felt sharp. I thanked him, wrote down his name, and ended the call. Then I sat still, staring at the bank statement spread across my desk. My parents hadn't just leaned on my help. They had crossed into theft, using the very trust I had built with them as the weapon. The messages from Mom continued. Honey, we need to talk. Then, you're being unreasonable. Finally, you're tearing this family apart. I didn't respond to any. Each message was proof of how their love had conditions attached. It was never about care, only compliance. That night, I found myself scrolling through old emails. There it was, an automated message from the bank 2 months old, labeled refinance confirmation. I had ignored it back then, assuming it was spam. The attached PDF now told the full story. The form was digitally signed under my name, using the email and access credentials tied to the joint account I had once shared with Dad for payment transfers. I had left that access open, trusting they wouldn't misuse it. That trust had become their entry point. I printed every document, highlighted every date, every code, every name. The paper stack grew thick, each page proof of betrayal. When I reached the final one, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. There was no misunderstanding left to fix. They hadn't stumbled into this mistake. They had planned it. The refinance required 2 verifications, both cleared within 10 minutes of each other. Someone in that house knew exactly what they were doing.
Later, as I stared out at the snow-covered street, I realized how quiet betrayal sounds when it stops being emotional and starts becoming evidence. For years, I had been their safety net. Now, I was their collateral. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began drafting an email. Not to my mother, not to Ava, but to Ethan Davis. The subject line read, "Formal dispute of fraudulent authorization." My hands no longer shook. My breathing slowed. Each word I typed was measured, deliberate, precise. I attached the evidence and requested an immediate freeze on the account. When I hit send, the silence returned. But this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I wasn't frozen anymore. They were. By late October, the truth had interest. The chill in the air matched the sharpness that had taken root inside me. I met with Clark Benson, a real estate attorney known for his precision and patience. His office was lined with case files, shelves full of quiet victories. He read through my documents silently, his eyes narrowing only once when he reached the refinance agreement. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me steadily. "Miss Carter," he said, "this is textbook forgery. The electronic authorization was reused without consent. Whoever accessed your credentials committed fraud." His words didn't surprise me, but hearing them spoken aloud made something inside settle. It was no longer a suspicion or betrayal I carried alone. It was a legal fact. Clark explained the next steps carefully, outlining how we could report the incident, freeze the account, and initiate a civil complaint. I nodded through most of it, feeling a strange calm like standing in a storm after realizing you cannot get wetter. When I left his office, the folder in my hand felt heavier than before, not because of the paper, but because of the clarity it contained. That afternoon, I received an email from Ethan, the bank manager, who had helped me gather evidence. Attached were detailed transaction logs, timestamps, and system records, all pointing to my parents' account activity during the refinance.
"I hope this helps you, Miss Carter," he wrote. "I'm sorry this happened." I thanked him, though. No apology could fix the truth that my family had turned my trust into collateral. 3 days later, Ava's name appeared on my phone. Her message was short. "Mom wants to have brunch. Just us. It's time to talk." I almost deleted it, but something in me wanted closure, not reconciliation. I replied, "Where and when?" Sunday morning, I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. The place smelled of cinnamon and burnt espresso, the kind of comfort that didn't fit the tension brewing in my chest. I chose a table by the window, placed the folder beside my cup, and waited. A few minutes later, Ava walked in, followed by our parents. Mom was dressed perfectly, as if appearance could rewrite the truth. Dad's shoulders were heavy, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ava began with a smile too bright to be real. "Jolene, we're glad you came. Things got messy. Let's clear the air." Her tone was rehearsed, her charm shield. Mom nodded in agreement, stirring her coffee with practiced grace. "We all made mistakes," she said. "But we're family. We can fix this." I looked at her and then at the folder. "Fix?" I said quietly. "You used my name for your loan." The words fell like glass on tile. Ava froze. Mom's hand trembled slightly. Dad didn't move at all. "That's not true," Ava said quickly, eyes starting to Mom. "You must be mistaken. Maybe the bank." I opened the folder and slid a printed page across the table. My name sat above the digital signature, time-stamped, verified. "The bank didn't do this," I said. "You did." Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. Her face lost its practiced calm. Dad's silence became louder than any confession. I could almost hear the hum of the coffee machine behind us, filling the void. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "You want to talk about mistakes?" I pressed play on an old voicemail, one she had left weeks earlier. Her voice filled the small space, sharp and pleading. "The bank keeps calling, Jolene. We need your help. You know we can't lose the house. You'll take care of it, right?" The color drained from her face. Ava's expression hardened as if anger could undo proof. "You didn't have to go this far," she said through clenched teeth. I met her gaze steadily. "You didn't have to steal from me." Mom finally whispered. "We only did it to keep everything together for the family." I gathered the papers back into the folder. "Then keep it together without me." I stood, placed the bill on the table, and added softly, "I've already filed to remove my name from the loan and end all support. The bank and the court will handle the rest." None of them spoke. The sound of spoons tapping against ceramic filled the silence. I felt no triumph, only release. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months lifted as I turned toward the door. Outside, the October air bit at my skin, crisp and cold, but it felt clean. Behind me, the cafe windows reflected their figures, still seated, still small. Ahead, the street stretched open, quiet, waiting. For the first time in years, I walked without looking back. 3 months later, the house went quiet. The street that once echoed with my mother's morning gardening music and my father's cautious footsteps now held only the sound of winter wind against the shutters. The for sale sign that once marked their pride now carried a red sticker that said bank owned.
I passed by it once on my way to drop off paperwork at the county office, and the sight felt strange, like staring at a ghost of something I used to protect. The foreclosure had moved quickly. Without my payments, and with the fraud case under review, the mortgage defaulted within weeks. The bank repossessed the property before Christmas. The furniture went into storage, the garden wilted, and the front porch lights never came on again. The neighbors whispered, of course. Families like ours were supposed to be respectable, not on the local foreclosure list. Ava moved out first. I heard from Ethan that she had been staying with a friend across town, sleeping on a pull-out couch in a cramped apartment. The same girl who once posted photos of family unity now deleted every trace of those smiles. Her social media went silent. When the bank's legal department contacted her for a deposition, she refused to respond. That silence didn't last long. A month later, the district attorney's office filed a civil complaint against her for falsifying financial documents during the refinance. Clark, my attorney, forwarded the notice to me without comment. He didn't need to say anything. The consequences had finally found their way home. Mom, on the other hand, found someone new to blame. She called once, long after the house was gone. Her voice a brittle whisper. "You didn't have to destroy us," she said. "You could have helped." I didn't reply. There were too many layers of irony in that statement to peel back. She never mentioned the forged documents or the lies that led there. To her, she was still the ungrateful daughter who wouldn't obey. Dad remained silent as always. I wondered if he agreed with her, or if silence was simply his way of surviving. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. The family I once tried to save had already collapsed long before the bank took the house.
The first week of February, I moved into a new apartment in Rochester. It was small, but filled with light, with windows overlooking a narrow parkway where children walked home from school every afternoon. I bought secondhand furniture, assembled it myself, and for the first time in years, every object in the room belonged solely to me. There was no mortgage notice, no debt collector, no voice demanding explanations, just quiet. Each morning I brewed coffee and watched the snow fall over the city. Sometimes I thought about Ava and wondered whether she blamed me or finally saw the truth. Other times I thought about my mother's garden, how she used to say, "You can't grow anything in the cold." She was wrong. Some things grow best in the cold. Clarity, boundaries, self-respect. When the final court decision arrived, it confirmed what Clark had promised months ago. My name was officially removed from the fraudulent loan, and the liability was reassigned to the original borrowers. The judge noted the deliberate misuse of personal authorization, citing intentional misrepresentation. Reading those words, I felt no satisfaction, only closure. It was the clean ending I had needed, but never thought I'd get. Ethan sent a short email that same afternoon. "The case is closed. I wish you the best moving forward." I replied with 2 words. "Thank you." There was nothing else to say. He had been professional, kind, and honest, qualities that now felt rare in my vocabulary of family. At night, the quiet of the apartment grew deep, but not lonely. I learned to enjoy the rhythm of my own company. I cooked dinner for one, read books without distraction, and sometimes let music fill the space. The stillness that once frightened me now became the proof of survival. I no longer waited for apologies, explanations, or redemption. Some stories didn't end with reconciliation. Some simply ended. One evening, I found an old photograph tucked in my drawer, a family portrait from years ago, all of us standing in front of that same house before it turned into a headline. We looked happy then, maybe because we believed we were. I stared at the image for a long time before slipping it back into the envelope. The past could stay archived. I had no use for it anymore. Life in Rochester wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I paid my rent, my bills, and slept without checking my phone for emergency messages. I no longer measured my worth in sacrifice. My peace didn't need witnesses, likes, or approval. It only needed space to exist. On my last night before spring, I stood by the window and watched the city lights blur against the falling snow. It wasn't the life I planned, but it was a life I chose. And as I turned off the lights and walked toward my quiet room, one thought settled clearly in my mind. Peace was the most expensive thing I ever bought.